Jaya Nitya Lila Pravishta Om Vishnu Pad Paramahansa Parivrajikacharya Shotashat Shishimad Abhaya Charana Vrinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada Ki Jaya Nitya Lila Pravishta Om Vishnu Pad Paramahansa Parivrajikacharya Shotashat Shishimad Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Goswami Prabhupada Ki Ananta Koti Vaishnav Vrinda Ki Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur Ki Prem Sheke Ho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shirveta Karada Shivasara Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Ki Shri Shri Radha Krishna Go Gopinath Shama Kunda Radha Kunda Giri Govardhana Ki Vrindavan Dhama Ki Navadvip Dhama Ki Yamuna Mai Ki Ganga Mai Ki Bhakti Devi Ki Tulasi Devi Ki Samaveta Bhakta Vrinda Ki Nitai Gaur Premanandi. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada Ki. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Reading from 4th Canto, Srimad Bhagavatam, Chapter 11, Verse 12. Sattvam hare anudyatas tat pumsamapi samataha katam tva adyam kritavan anushiksham shatam vratam. Sattvam hare anudyatas tat pumsamapi samataha katam tva adyam kritavan anushiksham shatam vratam. Sattvam hare anudyatas tat pumsamapi samataha katam tva adyam kritavan anushiksham shatam vratam. Prabhus. Anudyatas Satam vratam. Sattvam hare anudyatas tat pumsamapi samataha katam tvadyam kritavan anushiksham shatam vratam. Sattvam hare anudyatas tat pumsamapi samataha katam tva adyam kritavan anushiksham shatam vratam. Sattvam hare anudyatas tat pumsamapi samataha katam tva adyam kritavan anushiksham shatam vratam. Sattvam hare anudyatas tat pumsamapi samataha katam tva adyam kritavan Anushiksham shatam vratam. Word by word. Sa, that person. Tvam, you. Hare, by the Supreme Lord. Anudyatya, being always remembered. Tat, his. Pumsham, by the devotees. Api, also. Samataha, esteemed. Katam, why? Tu, then. Avadyam, abominable act. Kritavan, you have undertaken. Anushikshan, setting the example. Satam, of saintly persons. Vratam, a vow. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki. Translation. Because you are a pure devotee of the Lord, and the Lord is always thinking of you, and you are also recognized by all His confidential devotees, your life is meant for exemplary behavior. I am therefore surprised. Why have you undertaken such an abominable task? Purport. Dhruva Maharaj was a pure devotee and was accustomed to always thinking of the Lord. Reciprocally, the Lord always thinks of those pure devotees who think only of Him 24 hours a day. As a pure devotee does not know anything beyond the Lord, so the Lord does not know anything beyond His pure devotee. Swayambhuva Manu pointed out this fact to Dhruva Maharaj. Not only are you a pure devotee, but you are recognized by all the pure devotees of the Lord. You should always act in such an exemplary way that others may learn from you. Under the circumstances, it is surprising that you have killed so many faultless yakshas. Om Jnanantimidandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurum Meditam Nena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Shtabitam Yena Bhutale Sayam Rupa Karamayam Dadati Svabhandantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yutupada Kamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sragajitam Sahagana Ragunata Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvitam Sadvutam Parishana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Vishankan Vitamscha He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dinabandhu Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostute Tapta Kanchana Karanji Radha Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sutadevi Pranami Hari Priye Namo Mahavadanyaya Krishna Prema Pradayate Krishnaya Krishna Chaitanya Namne Gurasvise Namaha Vanshakalpa Turubhyascha Kripa Sindhu Bhaevacha Patitanam Pavimbhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. To begin just by acknowledging first that I'm not neither qualified nor knowledgeable enough to be seated here. I look up to all of you very much, and it's a deep privilege to be here with you all today. So I ask for your blessings and for your forgiveness for any offenses that I cause. I thought I would begin with a small summary of the pastimes of Dhruva Maharaj leading up to this verse. I'm sure these are pastimes that you are all familiar with, but the mood of Dhruva Maharaj is so beautiful, and I thought to recount those early pastimes would get us all into the mood that this verse encapsulates. So we begin with King Uttanapad, the ruler of a kingdom, a great kingdom. and King Uttanapad had two wives, Suniti and Suruchi, and they both bore him a son. But King Uttanapad was far more favorable to Suruchi than he was to Suniti, and correspondingly he was far more favorable to the son born of Suruchi, than he was to the child born of Suniti. The child born of Suruchi's name was Uttama. The son born of Suniti was Dhruva. And so always from birth, Dhruva was treated less favorably than Uttama, because King Uttanapad was more favorable to the mother of Uttama than to the mother of Dhruva. There was an instance where Dhruva attempted to crawl onto the throne of his father, the king, and was heavily chastised by his stepmother for doing so. And she, proclaimed to him that you are not qualified, nor will you ever be qualified in this life to sit on this throne. Your only chance of ever sitting on this throne is to undergo extensive penance and austerity and meditate on God, and perhaps that will mean that in your next life you'll have a more favorable birth. And little Dhruva was very heartbroken by this chastisement, and his father, King Uttanapad, in that moment did nothing to support him, and so he took refuge in his mother Suniti and inquired to her, how is it that I can meditate on God and find God, so that I can fulfill this request of my stepmother. And Suniti, not believing that he would really undergo such an action, she said, little Dhruva, many saints and sages have found God by wandering into the forest and meditating there and meeting great saints. And of course Suniti didn't think that her 5-year-old son would ever do such a thing, but Dhruva contemplated this, and his heart became resolved that is what he wanted to do. And so at 5 years old, he wandered into the forest of Madhuvan, looking for God, searching for God, and along the way comes into contact with Narad Muni. Narad Muni, this mystical saint who appears throughout the Bhagavatam to give guidance and wisdom to different personalities. It is said that by Krishna's grace we find Guru, and by Guru's grace we find Krishna. And so Narad Muni found Dhruva, and initially told him that this is not the stage of life where you undertake such a thing as going into the forest by yourself. You go home back to your kingdom. But Dhruva was very resolved, very determined in his desire to seek God. And so Narad Muni initiated him into the process of devotional service, and initiated him with the mantra Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, and told him to meditate on this mantra and on the form of God. And so little Dhruva, with great determination, spent weeks and months in the forest of Madhuvan, the bank of the Yamuna, meditating on this mantra that he'd been given by his spiritual master, meditating on the form of the Lord, and eating very little, drinking, sleeping very little, focused solely on his goal of finding God. And his determination was so sincere that God, the Lord, appeared before him, and he opened his eyes and the Lord was before him. And it was an instance where he was so overwhelmed with love and with devotion, but he didn't have the words to express this love and this devotion, and he so much wanted to praise his Lord. And so Shri Krishna touched him on the head, and suddenly Dhruva was filled with this knowledge, and he was able to spontaneously compose and recite these most beautiful prayers for his Lord, prayers which are still recited to this day because they encapsulate so much this mood of a pure devotee. So Krishna, bestowed upon Dhruva this spiritual knowledge and understanding. And Krishna said to him, "What is it? I can see in your heart that you undertook this, all of this penance and austerity, so that you could have a kingdom, that you could ultimately have a kingdom that is even greater than your father's." And Dhruva said, "Yes, this initially was my desire and my intention, but the more I have meditated upon you, I have realized that I had been searching amongst broken pieces of glass for my happiness, and by great mercy I have come across the most precious of jewels, which is knowledge of you and love for you. So how could I ever return to looking amongst broken glass for my happiness when I have found this precious jewel?" And Krishna acknowledged this, but told him that nonetheless you must return to your kingdom and be a great ruler for your people, and rule with spiritual principles in your heart, and be an exemplar for your people to look up to and to follow. And so Dhruva Maharaj returned, and for the months that he was away, his father, his mother were devastated, even his stepmother. They were devastated at the loss of Dhruva, and they felt great guilt, great emotional burden for having treated him in such a way that he felt the need to leave. And so they were delighted at Dhruva's return, and Dhruva bowed down at their feet and forgave them, and later became ruler of the kingdom, and was a very righteous ruler, ruling for thousands of years. And then later there was an instance where his brother Uttama, son of Suruchi, went into the forest and was killed by a yaksha demon, and everyone was so overwhelmed with lamentation, and Dhruva particularly was just succumbed by lamentation and with anger as well. And so he travelled to the city of Alakpuri, where the yakshas reside, in order to avenge the death of his brother. And he killed many thousands of yaksha, 130,000, just in this state of great lamentation and anger, feeling vengeful for the death of his brother. And it is at this point where Dhruva is taking the lives of all these yakshas that his grandfather, Svayambhuva Manu Maharaj, who was a great saint, appeared before Dhruva to give him instruction and to advise him that this was not the course of action fit for a king, fit for someone of his position, fit for a pure devotee. And this chapter 11, is the instructions given by Svayambhuva Manu to Dhruva regarding how he should reframe the situation and see it differently. So I'll just read the translation one more time. Because you are a pure devotee of the Lord, and the Lord is always thinking of you, and you are also recognized by all his confidential devotees. Your life is meant for exemplary behavior. I am therefore surprised. Why have you undertaken such an abominable task? Now it is important to remember in all of this that Dhruva was not merely a king, but he was a Kshatriya of the warrior caste. And a Kshatriya, their duty, their dharmic responsibility is to defend their kingdom on the basis of religious principles. So in this way, Dhruva Maharaj was acting according to his duty. And we must remember also that he has spiritual knowledge and understanding as given to him by Krishna. So there's no question of that Dhruva Maharaj was not a most pure devotee and great sage. But it is also true in this instance that he did not act in a way that was in perfect alignment with his understanding. And that is something that must be remembered, that we must embody that which we have learnt, that which we have understood to be true. It is said that wisdom is the application of the knowledge that we have. So we may have some knowledge, but it is not until we apply that knowledge to our lives, to our behavior, that it becomes wisdom. And for one who does not know, for one who is not in awareness of certain parts of knowledge, you cannot hold them accountable for acting in a certain way. For example, if a child does not yet know, bless you, that it is wrong to steal another child's toy, how can we hold that child accountable when he does so? But however, for a child who has been told and who has understood that it is wrong to steal, then moving forward he is accountable if that behavior continues. So in the similar way, once we have the knowledge of how it is that we should live, how it is that we should act in the world, that comes with it a responsibility to align our behavior in such a way that is resonant with the knowledge that we have received and understood to be true. When is that Dhruva is not simply a devotee, he is also a ruler and a king, and a king by nature is setting an example for his followers, for the people of the kingdom. And so it is especially important that someone in a position of leadership always acts in an exemplar way, because their actions will be reflected in the actions of their people. And so the true qualification of a leader is not so much, is less so the knowledge that they have, and more so how it is that they live, how it is that they, the decisions that they make in this world. It has been established in a psychological sense that children learn not from the words of their parents, but by observation of their parents, and by seeing how it is that their parents behave. That is how a child learns, not by the words that the parents use. And so if we just reflect on that and remember that more influential than our words, more influential than our understanding, is the decisions we make in the world and how it is that we choose to live. That is what will be of greatest benefit to others, is modeling the exemplar behavior. And so it was therefore just unbefitting of Dhruva Maharaj to engage in what is called atirosana. Atirosana meaning excessive anger, which is the state that he was in, and the state that compelled him to act in such a way. For any devotee of the Lord, it is not proper and should be strongly avoided to to take the lives of any living beings. Said in commentary by Vedavyas Priya Maharaj, said that we can only use as much force to deter an aggressor as they have used against us. And so there was one person who was killed by a yaksha, and so it would be lawful and dharmic for Dhruva to respond by perhaps taking the life of one yaksha, but 130,000 yakshas were slain by Dhruva, and so this reaction is disproportionate to the offense that was committed, and therefore it was not lawful and not righteous in the same way. It must be remembered that the body of each living entity is the residence of the Paramatma, the Super Soul, part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, and so we cannot take life callously. You must honor. We are certainly not these bodies, but the bodies are the temporary residence of the Paramatma, of the Super Soul, and for that reason, life must be protected and not taken for unnecessary reason. But this is also a pastime and an instance which can help us to forgive ourselves when we are caught up in emotional reactivity. To think that a personality, a divine personality like Dhruva Maharaj was overwhelmed by a material circumstance in such a way that he reacted in a way that was not fully dharmic. We can understand that will surely happen to all of us while we are still in this material world, that we will become overwhelmed and caught up in reactivity, and that just the modes of nature are strong enough to pull us into that state of reactivity regardless of our spiritual sincerity and progression. And so if that's the case, how then to alleviate and dispel that state of reactivity? We can look to Dhruva for the answer to this and to this pastime, that when Dhruva was caught up in this state of reactivity, it was only by the association of his grandfather Manu Maharaj that his confusion was clarified, and that his emotions were subdued, and that he was able to find it within himself to forgive the yakshas that had caused this offense to his brother. We see this, of course, also in Bhagavad Gita, where Arjuna is completely overwhelmed and overcome with lamentation and confusion about the circumstances of the battle of Kurukshetra. And it is only by association with his dear friend and Lord Krishna that his own confusion and lamentation is subdued, and Arjuna, of course, returns to the state of being clear in his vision and clear in his understanding, and that was through the association of Krishna. And in the same way, Dhruva's lamentation and anger was subdued by the association of Swayambhuva Manu, his grandfather, a saintly person. And so what we can take from this and always remind ourselves is regardless of the point of our progression in our spiritual lives, this sadhu sangha, this association of holy people cannot be understated in its importance. I know in my own life that I certainly would not be here and would not be nothing that has come to me in my life would have come to me without the association of wonderful people around me. And so when we find ourselves in a state of reactivity and overwhelm, if we can remember to seek the shelter of saintly persons, this is the formula for clarifying our confusion in those moments. And to touch on also a seeming paradox that is observed here. You'll recall when I was recounting the earlier pastimes of Dhruva, when Dhruva returned back home from the forest, the first thing that he did was bow down at the feet of not only his mother and not only his father, but his stepmother also. His stepmother and his father, the people who had neglected him and mistreated him and not given him that love and that acceptance that he deserved, to such a degree that he felt the need to leave his home, leave his role in the palace. That is how distraught he was by the treatment that he had received, and yet when he returned to the palace, the first thing he did was bow at their feet and forgive them. So we see in this instance an act of supreme forgiveness. Forgiveness that we can probably not even contemplate. Being able to bow at the feet of the people who have done us the most wrong and the most injustice in our life. And yet, why is it that Dhruva was able to demonstrate such supreme forgiveness in this instance, and yet wasn't able to forgive the yakshas who had killed his brother? And the answer to this perhaps is that in the case of his father and his stepmother, the offense that they had been committed towards Dhruva, and because the offense was committed towards him, he was tolerant and he was forgiving. However, in this case, the offense was not committed towards himself. The offense was committed to one he loved very dearly, his brother. And so his capacity for tolerance and forgiveness was greatly less, and he found himself in a state of reactivity. And so the principle here is that oftentimes you'll find these personalities are more tolerant of offenses committed towards themselves than they are of offenses committed towards the ones that they loved. And perhaps we can even feel that in our own lives, that we are quicker to forgive when someone does us wrong than when someone greatly harms someone that we love. I know I can resonate with that feeling also. We see other instances of this throughout Shastra. We see the pastime of Jagai and Madai, where they cast a bottle, a glass bottle, at the head of Lord Nityananda. It breaks on his head and causes a wound, starts to bleed. This is Lord Nityananda. We cannot even conceive of such a terrible offense. But Nityananda in that moment was not at all reactive. He was incredibly tolerant and forgiving and ready to not punish these rascals. But it was Chaitanya, Nityananda's dear Chaitanya, who reacted strongly and who wanted to use reasonable aggression and force against these miscreants, and it was Nityananda who had to subdue that desire of Chaitanya. But we see again in that instance that the person to whom the offense had been committed did not react as strongly as the dear friend of the person to whom the offense that had been committed. We see also the pastime of Maharaj Parikshit when he placed the snakeskin on the head of Shamika Rishi, and this was an offense, not a great offense, but an offense nonetheless. But Shamika Rishi, the person whom the offense had been committed to, he was almost entirely unfazed by this. He just simply cast off the skin and continued to meditate. But it was the son Shringi who took offense to this and who cursed Maharaj Parikshit in a series of events that ultimately led to this great Srimad Bhagavatam being spoken. And so again we see that we are more tolerant, or there are certain personalities that are more tolerant of offences being committed towards themselves than they are of offences being committed towards the ones that they loved. And perhaps if we see this later in Shastra, we can reflect again on this principle. Just wanted to touch also on just the purification of our desires that takes place on this spiritual path, which is exemplified so much by the pastimes of Dhruva, and how he first engaged in his meditation in order for material acquisition and to have a kingdom of his own, a great kingdom. But the more that he engaged with the process, the more his desires gradually became purified, purified to such an extent that he no longer wanted that great kingdom. He simply wanted the love of God, and in the same way here, that his desire when his brother was killed was to kill as many yakshas as he can. He was just slaying them with this great arrow of Narayan, just slaying thousands upon thousands of yakshas, and that was his desire, because his mind was clouded by anger and lamentation. But then he had this darshan of his grandfather, who clarified these emotions, and he regained his spiritual understanding. And so again we see Dhruva's his desires become purified through engagement with spiritual practice and processes. And just for all of ourselves, we reflect that our initial intention for engaging in spiritual practice might be very different to the intention that ultimately develops. I know for many of us, it's the spiritual life is sought as a refuge from the suffering that takes place in material life, and that is the initial attraction to spiritual life, and then gradually as you practice and try to progress, your intention is not simply to escape suffering, but maybe to love, maybe to serve, maybe to connect, but to be in service or to be in love. That then becomes the desire in your heart, and you notice that over time our spiritual desires evolve, and that is proof of the process that we are undertaking, that these initially material desires in our heart evolve to become spiritual, and when we notice that in our heart, we can take refuge in that as being signifying of the progress we are making. I wanted to say so that the seemingly negative experiences that we go through in this life can often enable us to approach future situations with an enhanced empathy and understanding. Sometimes when we are subjected to loneliness, we end up finding a connection within ourselves. If we experience loss, we sometimes emerge from that with a feeling of gratitude. And hardship can cultivate resilience, and neglect can bring forth compassion. And we see this in Dhruva Maharaj, and in that as a child he was not given the love and the acceptance that he deserved, and then by Krishna's instruction he was in a position of a king, of a ruler, who was essentially the father for a whole kingdom. And he was such a righteous king, and he treated all the people of his kingdom with respect and dignity and with love. And I'd say that he understood the importance of ruling with those qualities, because those were not things that he had received himself. And sometimes when we don't receive something, we understand the importance of it. We understand the importance of giving it to others. If you've spent any period fasting significantly, and you feel the weakening effect that has on your body, you realize the importance of the nourishment of food, and you have a desire to give that to others. If you've spent time when you've been neglected of love or neglected of connection, you feel so clearly the importance and the need of that in this world. And so, and correspondingly, that comes with it a desire to share that, to give that to others. And I just wanted to perhaps conclude with what takes place a little further on, which is that in the same way that Arjuna's mind was pacified and his emotions were subdued and his vision was cleared by his darshan with his dearest friend Krishna, Dhruva's mind was clarified by his association with his grandfather. And when he reached this state of clarity and understanding, he was able to forgive the remaining yakshas, and he no longer held any hatred in his heart towards them. And Kuvera was the ruler of the yakshas, and Kuvera was very distressed when he saw Dhruva slaying all of his yakshas. But when Dhruva arrived at a point of forgiveness towards these yakshas one of whom had committed this offense, Kuvera was very pleased. He was very pleased that Dhruva had come to a place of forgiveness in his heart. And so he descended into this world and asked Dhruva what is it that I can offer you for finding it in your heart to forgive these yakshas, one of whom had committed this offense to your family. And Dhruva, in this state, in this time, his mind was clarified and his heart was full, and so he had only one desire in his heart and one request of Kuvera, and that was asking for complete faith and remembrance always of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And so we see Dhruva restored to his spiritual understanding by association with his wonderful grandfather. If there are any corrections or comments or questions, Hare Krishna. Thank you, Prabhu. I was told by a wonderful teacher of mine, Tashan Krishna Prabhu, that an exercise we can undertake in trying to deepen our immersion in these pastimes is to try to deeply visualize the text as it's being read, and how you're almost constructing an image in your mind of what is taking place. And every text that you read, let it add to the visualization that you're creating in your mind. And also I love to engage with great speakers of pastimes, and I find that their mood of immersion is inspiring to me and helps me to deepen my feeling of immersion in these pastimes. Wonderful. Grantha Raja Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Srila Prabhupada ki, Ananta Koti Vaishnavrinda ki jai. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna. Thank you, Mataji. Yeah. Thank you, Mataji. Read the whole